All right, so now it's time to introduce our first speaker. And Wray Carvelas came to our summit last year. Was very happy to see it. Little did he know at the time, I've been waiting for years to get him to come and speak. Wray, I met when he was, I want to call it operations director, it's probably wrong, at a company called DRA Minerals. They create mines for mineral extraction. At the time, DRA was fundamentally in Australia and throughout all of Africa. During that time, we had an opportunity to talk as we flew across Africa and as we went to the different sites, as we met the individuals that worked, the contractors and the engineers who were building these mines. And I squarely remember being out in the northern Cape, I believe, a desert area and the like, and we had just saw the mine, and he was explaining to me that half of the population, the laws in Africa, half of your contractor population are required to come from the local community. And that's to help them economically, that's to help build skills in the local community, but these individuals, some of them, and probably most of them, come from sustenance farming and from villages that are probably illiterate in the language of engineering, never been on an industrial site before. And Wray impressed upon me that it is on them, it is on DRA to take them from a village where they are living as farmers into an industrial construction facility and keep them safe. And so I've been in many different places over my time and got to stay at mines and in construction sites. And there's often a modular kind of city where the people who fly in as engineers or as specialist contractors would stay in. And they had messes, and if you're in Australia, they have a wet mess. You know what I'm saying, right? We got some stories around that. And I asked Wray, could we go see the camp? Because I knew they had the camps and the like. So Wray and I and other folks jump in their vehicles and we go to the camp. And when we get to the camp, it looked like many other professional camps where you had these modular facilities, a gate around the area, a mess and things like that. But as we passed it, there was a shanty town, corrugated metal cardboard shacks, just nestled right up against that camp. And Wray explained to me that their uncles, brothers and sisters are now working for the facility, for the construction site. Those people get to stay in the camp, and now the camp has good food, it has toilet paper, it has clean water, and their families start nestling up against it as a safe place to be and perhaps get some of the overflow, if you would, right? And then the other community people come in, and some of the dark side, and there was a small city next to it. And it was then I understood Wray's mission. Wray worked with his excellent team at DRA across Africa. And it occurred to me his mission, if he could teach these people to be safe, and if he could teach these people actively caring, he's not only helping the construction sites, he can help Africa. He can help the world. He then moved to Canada. DRA was not in Canada. He created DRA Americas, a very strong company now. They made him the CEO of DRA Global, which he held his position until his retirement, and now he is teaching other, not only Canadians, but to other folks in North America, probably the whole world, leadership, how to lead in safety, production, and quality. It's an exceptional honor to introduce you to Wray Carvelas.
Thank you, Tim. Is this working? You guys can hear me? Good. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Tim, for those really kind words. In South Africa, we have a saying called lekker man lekker. Remember that, Tim? Lekker man lekker. That means great, man, great. And it's really great to be here this morning. It's great to be among so many safety professionals and professional leaders. And when I look around this room, I see leaders in this room who carry great responsibility. Because if you're a leader, God has given you a job where you're responsible for the lives of other people. And especially if you work in an industry where there are high risks and hazards. God's put you in a position where you're responsible for those people's lives. That's a big deal. Best we make a great success of that. And when I look around this room, I see people who make decisions every single day that determine whether other people will go home safely or not. That's a big deal. And I want to start with a simple question. What if one moment could fundamentally change the way you lead? For me, that didn't happen in a boardroom. It didn't happen in a strategic planning session. It certainly didn't happen or come from a textbook. At the time, I was quite deep into my career. I was leading projects across Africa, across several countries in Africa. And like many leaders, my focus was on performance. Yes, I was focused on safety, but I was focused on results. And like many leaders, I believe that I understood what leadership was all about. But at a safety convention in Orlando, Florida, and later on in Roanoke, my insights changed. From that event, and more importantly, the people that I met, changed something much deeper in me. Through those engagements with Scott Geller and Tim Ludwig, I was introduced to an idea that quite honestly disrupted how I saw leadership. I learned that safety isn't just a system. It's a reflection on how we lead. And leadership is how we show up and how we make a difference in the people's lives that we lead every single day. Every single day. What began as a pursuit of safety excellence became something much deeper, much more personal. It became a journey. A journey from managing outcomes to influencing behavior. A journey from driving compliance to creating commitment. And a journey from leading with authority to leading with care. And today I want to share some of that journey with you. Because this isn't just about safety, it's about something much bigger. It's about moving from safety to significance. So, it all began for me in South Africa as a metallurgist. I spent the early years of my career working for companies like Anglo American on the gold mines through South Africa. Later joined De Beers, which at the time was the same company. It was part of another division of the Anglo American group. And when I was there, I got quite interested in the project side of the business and got involved in some of the projects. And I really liked the sort of independence I had as a project manager as opposed to in operations. So got involved in that and eventually moved on to a project management company in South Africa called Bateman. Didn't stay there too long and then moved on to Kellogg Brown and Root, which is part of the Halliburton Group. And they were building a mining division in Africa. To cut a long story short, we fast forward a few years and I joined a company called, in those days it was called DRA Mineral Projects, later to become rebranded as DRA Global. When I joined them back around 26 years ago now, it was a small company. I was employee about number 150, a very boutique style project engineering and project management company. And we went on, and I played a significant role in building that company from that small boutique-style company to a company across 5 continents with almost 5,000 people in the organization. However, when I joined, I went through a project which I call my baptism in fire. Okay, it was a small project. It's not that image on the screen. The project that I'm talking about is probably a little smaller than that, so it was really not very big. But our client, Southern Era, wanted this platinum facility constructed as quickly as possible. They called it the Accelerated Production Initiative. Because they were going to fund the construction of the bigger project was probably 4 times that size from the revenue created from this Accelerated Production Initiative. So it wasn't very big, but from a blank piece of paper, we designed, engineered, constructed, and commissioned this mill in 154 days. That's 5 months. Now, to put it in perspective, this mill still has a primary crusher, a secondary crusher, a primary mill, float cells, a tailings thickener, all the big components are there. You couldn't buy a crusher in 6 months, let alone 5. Have it delivered to site, install it, and commission it. That will probably have taken about 8 months. So the only way we could do this was to use pre-used equipment. And that's the only time pre-used equipment makes sense. It doesn't save you much money, but it shortens your timeline. So that's what we did. It only had about 1,000 tons of steel and maybe 300 or 400 tons of plate work. I had 11 fabricators on the job, so that I had options if I needed to move quickly. So we completed it in those 5 months, and it was a phenomenal achievement. Anglo Platinum looked at this later and said, hey, can you do that again for us? And we did. We went and did a similar project for Anglo Platinum, and theirs took a little longer with all the bureaucracy, but we completed that one in 6 months. And why I tell that story is we later went on to build the main concentrator for Southern Era Messina Platinum. And everything was going pretty well. And it was at that project where I experienced my first fatality as a project manager. One of the workers was installing a return idler on an elevated incline conveyor, wasn't tied in, and he fell to his death. And that fatality had a profound impact on me because it was just so unnecessary. That people die for the sake of this project. And it's probably something that he had done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. But that day, he fell to his death. And it was then that I promised myself that I would do everything I could to ensure that never happens again. Not on a project under my watch. The problem was I had no idea what it was I needed to do. I'm making myself a promise, but I had no idea how I delivered on that promise. And it was only in 2005 that I became aware of the World Safety Congress in Orlando. And I decided to go because I was looking for something that could change the way we led and managed our safety program. So before I left sunny South Africa to come across to Orlando, someone said to me, Ray, when you get there, you've got to go see Scott Geller. I said, oh, really? Who's he? Did a little bit of research and decided, yeah, I better go see Scott. So I went to go see his presentation when I was in Orlando, and it was amazing. He was talking about this thing called people-based safety. I'd always heard about behavior-based safety, and I had seen some really awful implementations of behavior-based safety, where you've got these safety coaches, they called them, that walked around with a green sleeve on the one arm and a red sleeve on the other arm. And if you were doing something they liked, then the green sleeve went up. And if they didn't like it, the red sleeve went up, and then they had a conversation with you. And that certainly wasn't something that impressed me. Okay, to me, that was a bit of a fad. So when I listened to Scott Geller, I was just blown away at this whole actively caring for people and the way he talked about how behavior-based safety really should be implemented. And at that convention, he was preceded by Charlie Moorcroft. And those of you who have seen Charlie's presentation, where he talks about the injuries he experienced when he was almost blown up in an explosion at an Exxon refinery. And then having that presentation, which was powerful, followed by Dr. Scott Geller, man, it just blew me away. I thought, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. This can not only change the way we manage our safety program, it can change the way people lead themselves. It can change the way leadership is delivered in the organization. So I knew this was something different. This was something enduring. And as excited as I realized we were not ready. If I took this concept into DRA back then, the culture just wasn't ready for that. There was still way too much focus in the culture on compliance, okay? The focus was all about compliance, authority, mandating behavior. And people-based safety and actively caring for people is quite contrary to that. So I knew that we weren't ready. And if I had brought Tim and his team across then, we were probably destined for failure. So I had to spend time, I had to build confidence and belief in the program. I had to build the confidence in the leadership of DRA, and I had to build some enthusiasm that what we were going to do was going to make a difference. And that's what we did. I spent months talking to the board, talking to the senior leaders, talking to construction managers, talking to some of our clients because we worked on their properties. And we built that enthusiasm. And a little later, as we got ready, we hadn't yet initiated our program in South Africa. But I was invited to a people-based safety convention in Roanoke in Virginia. And it was at that convention where we began to plan our people-based safety intervention after several months of really lobbying with the folks in our leadership team, because that was probably one of the most important things I felt in implementing this people-based safety program, was the people needed to want it. And I knew if I could get that right and get some enthusiasm, they would embrace it. And because of my experience with Tim and with Scott and seeing what I'd seen, I knew this could work. I had the belief myself, but I had to get the rest of the organization to share that. And at that convention, I got to see Brad Gardner. And again, he shared his story about how he got injured when he lost his arm in a potato auger. And how that one moment of distraction, in that one moment of distraction, he lost his arm. And he tells the story of the cascading domino principle, and he connects, he builds on the relationship between our behaviors and injury. And again, it touched me deeply in terms of the story that he shared and the emotion that he had on how that one moment in his life changed his life completely. And I was so impressed, I bought the video, I bought the DVD, and I used that DVD when I went back to South Africa to talk and continue my conversations with our leadership and just get the message across so that they would embrace the change that we were about to embark upon. Anyway, we planned that intervention with Tim. I think at that point we started engaging with Molly McClintock, and we had planned to bring them across to South Africa to roll out 2 or 3 construction sites. I think it was 3 construction sites. But in the rollout to, in fact, train the trainer, because we couldn't be bringing guys from the US across constantly to come stand up our teams when we had teams all across Africa. So they headed across, and I still remained quite concerned. And when they got to South Africa, I got Tim and Molly to lead an intervention with all our key clients in the room, all our key contractors in the room, to really let them hear almost from the horse's mouth, from the experts, what we were going to do, okay? It was great for me to talk to them, but to have someone that has already stood up dozens of people-based safety interventions was just going to add a lot of value. So we did that. And it's because we work on our clients' properties. It's because the people who work on our construction sites are actually contract workers. They're not our employees. They're contract workers. So I needed the contractors to buy in. I needed the clients to buy in. And I think on that day, we did a really good job on getting those clients on board, following all the months of talk that I've done with them. The contractors seemed to love it. And at the heart of it, this was going to cost our clients and our contractors money. Okay? On some of our construction sites, we had thousands of contract workers. And each contract worker had to spend an extra day in people-based safety training to learn how to be observed, to understand the process. And the observers had to be trained to become people-based safety observers. And our clients were paying for this. And the other big concern of mine is that we had contracts across Africa, several miles, big projects. Some of them had hundreds of contractors, others had thousands of contractors at any one time across several sites. But I think what gave me the confidence was that we had a phenomenal team we had put together. The team of people that we had cherry-picked from the people that were really enthusiastic within our leadership team to form the People-Based Safety Steering Committee. And of course, Tim and Molly that came across. I knew that together with this team, we could accomplish this task that to me seemed quite overwhelming. A little later, after we had stood up these teams, I took some of that steering committee across to Traverse City to continue their education in people-based safety, but also that they can meet the bigger global community of people that are living the reality of an injury-free workplace and living the reality of inspiring workers every single day. So that was a wonderful event, and Connie, she was an inspiration. She's no longer with us, but she became a true ambassador for people-based safety across Africa. And I think at that event in Traverse City is where her enthusiasm really took flight and became such an ambassador. So one of the first sites we rolled out people-based safety at was Komani Iron Ore Mine, a big project. That's the one Tim talked about in the Northern Cape. Big project. The contract workforce on the site peaked at about 4,500 contract workers at the peak. That meant you had probably double that coming through the project, through the life of the project. It was $1 billion project. It was a big project. It was a complex project. And I was actually commissioning another project when the CEO called me and said, Wray, we've got this Komani project, as you know, but it's in trouble. We need your help. And I was the guy, fortunately or unfortunately, people called when the project was in trouble. So when I got onto the project, I was on the project in about month 6. And my estimate was in month 6, we were probably 6 or 7 months behind schedule already. And you're probably thinking, well, Wray, you're making this up. How can you be 6 or 7 months behind schedule in 6? It's easy. You change the scope, okay? And that primary crusher, whoops, that went the wrong way. That primary crusher up there, what they did before they started construction is they relocated it. That's a big crusher. It was the biggest crusher available in the world at the time. And that's how you can be behind schedule in your first 6 months of your project by about 6 months. Anyway, we went on to deliver this project, and we went on to roll out people-based safety at the site. And knowing the number of people come in, I knew that this was going to be a really important site. And in the early days on the project, as I was joining the project, we actually did have another fatal injury. A truck driver hauling ore from the open pit mine. We think he fell asleep while hauling, overturned the truck, and he was killed in that incident right at the start of the project. And maybe that was just the real motivation I needed. We've got to make this work. This team's got to make a difference here. That was my second fatality as a project manager. And again, if you've ever experienced those kinds of things, it's not pleasant. but it does awaken something deep inside you. And I wanted to make this work. So one of the big challenges that I knew we had was these settlements that Tim talks about. A big percentage of our workforce had to come from the local communities, and some of them lived in these kinds of informal settlements, townships we called them, okay? Shanty towns, where the living conditions are terrible, where the crime rate is incredibly high, okay? And now you're bringing 40 to 50% of your workforce from places like this, and you expect them to come to the mine, to the construction site, and work safely. They'd never been on a mine before. They don't know anything about the steel, the pumps, and all these things we're going to be installing. And you expect them to come from that and care about their co-worker. That was a big challenge. But in actual fact, these folks loved it. They loved people-based safety. Okay, and that was because of a concept in many African cultures of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is, I am because we are. Ubuntu highlights that an individual's well-being is intertwined with the collective. It emphasizes harmony, compassion, and respect. Heck, that sounds a lot like actively caring for people to me. And I guess what gave me the confidence is I had experienced some of this in my personal life, this concept of Ubuntu. Because in our church community, we did a lot of work in a little informal township called Olivenhoutbosch, which was not far from where we lived. And engaging with those folks, you get to understand what Ubuntu really is all about. When they're living in those kinds of conditions, and we went there and we helped them to establish a place of worship because they didn't have a place of worship. Okay? So we spent quite a bit of time working with them, and then you get to realize that, you know, although they're living in these appalling conditions, deep in their hearts, they actively care for one another. Deep in their hearts, they live Ubuntu. I am because of who we are. And that was the inspiration behind moving forward in actively caring for people. And it was at the heart of how we implemented it. Ubuntu is actively caring for people. And it formed the heart of what we did. That was our first actively caring for people logo that we came up with. And you can see the similarity. Okay. We called that Beyond Zero because we wanted to move beyond the statistics. Safety goes beyond the numbers. Safety is about the people. And I think Tim and his people really experienced some of that as we rolled out some of the teams certainly on the Kamani project and the other projects. That Ubuntu concept, I think Tim and his team felt that and experienced that to the point he really wanted to take it to the next level. And we went out and had dinner and got our faces painted and lived the whole African culture and African tradition. And I remember Tim was the one who said, come on, let's look really serious. I think he wanted us to look like African warriors or something. But it was a fun evening, and certainly I'm sure we all learned an awful lot from working with these folks around Ubuntu. So we stood up the people-based safety intervention at Kumani Iron Ore, and we delivered that project safely. Following the implementation, we worked more than 10 million man-hours. Can we say man-hours still, or is it just people hours? You know what I mean. We worked 10 million hours, okay, and never had another single lost time injury. That's a lot of man-hours. And back in those days, I'm not sure if the legislation's changed. I know in Canada it's changed, where there's a drive to push injuries more towards recordables and not lost times. Back in those days, you could not, in the South African environment, you could not mask an LTI. If you got injured and came back to work the next shift in a different role, on a light duty role, that's a lost time. you had to come back to your position that you're employed in, okay? If you're a truck driver, you got to come back and drive a truck, okay? If you're driving a broom and cleaning, that's a lost time. So we couldn't mask these, and I thought that was a phenomenal accomplishment given the magnitude of the project. But not only the magnitude, knowing that we were behind schedule from the start, we delivered the project ahead of schedule. And we delivered the project under budget. So we didn't compromise on the technical aspects of the project, but we just elevated the people side of the project to the highest possible level. And the camaraderie and the team that came to the mine every single day with the enthusiasm that we can do this, the belief that, you know what, I can complete this specific task without being hurt. And I can finish this shift without being hurt. And that's what we did. But from there, I think we took it further. To me, it was about developing that actively caring culture across the business, not just in safety leadership. The intervention redefined how I led, okay? I realized way back in Roanoke and way back in Orlando that safety culture and business culture were not different. I often get CEOs talk to me and say, Ray, man, you need to help us with our safety culture. I said, oh, really? Okay. Tell me, what does your safety culture look like? And they look at me a little funny, and I say, well, what does it look like? You can see culture. Culture's in the behavior of your people. You can see it. Culture may be in the quality of the conversations that people are having. Tell me about that. It's a very visible, tangible thing. CEOs also will often say, Ray, you know what, our workplace culture is okay. It's our safety culture we need to fix. That makes no sense whatsoever. You can't have good, great quality conversations when you're talking about production, and then suddenly you're going to go have a safety conversation and the culture drops. Like, that to me is not possible. Workplace culture is workplace culture. And I saw it. When we transformed the safety culture, the leadership culture transformed with it. Okay. So that was important. It wasn't a safety intervention to me, it was a leadership intervention. The philosophy was to create a total sense of total self-ownership and to foster a caring culture. Actively caring not just for safety, but actively caring for our results, actively caring for our performance, our clients, our employees, the communities that we work within. We had to actively care for the whole project. We created a belief in our purpose, a belief in our values, and fostered what we call discretionary effort. People wanted to do more because of that belief and that purpose. And I wanted to move actively caring beyond safety. And when I was appointed as the group CEO, the prior 5 or 6 years was focused on building the Americas business, as Tim had sort of described to you. And that wasn't an easy task itself. Started in Toronto with a blank piece of paper. There was no business to speak of, and we built that to a business of 500 or 600 people with offices in Toronto, Montreal, Pittsburgh, Lima, Belo Horizonte, and built a substantial business in, I thought, a pretty short space of time. We had 17 or 18 refined coal operations in the USA that we were responsible for. But while I was doing all that, I was aware that there was a problem with the culture. The culture in the company was declining. The culture became one of politics. The most senior leadership were very, very focused on politics. It was backstabbing. It was terrible. The elephant in the room, I keep pushing the wrong button. The elephant in the room of transformation was being ignored. People were missing the love. Where's the love? Are we having fun yet? People weren't having fun. Okay? No one knew what the big picture was. And the engagement in the organization was not very good. And I knew then, as I took over this role, that I was taking on a culture and a level of engagement that was deteriorating very quickly. And I knew I had to do something quickly to correct that. And I partnered with a company called Thinkspiration. And what I did is I worked with them to implement what I knew best, actively caring for people. Because I knew that actively caring for people will fix the engagement. Actively caring for people will get us back on track, that people understand the big picture, understand their purpose. And that's what we did. And this we actually used in the rollout of this exercise. This was our starting point. This was the brutal reality of the business as it was. And sometimes that brutal reality is not something we like to see. So we created our strategy through story. And it wasn't just a picture. Behind that picture was a 3 to 4 hour conversation that was had. Underpinning this whole strategy through story were several business tactics and plans to deliver upon the strategic goals of the company. But this was a 3 to 4 hour conversation which talked about where we had come from, talked about our competitors. It talked about our operations business that had become disconnected and needed to be reconnected. It talked about the winning culture we used to have. It talked about the strategic drivers of the business, some of the challenges we had, our strategic objectives, our core competencies, and it talked about our values. Now, in creating that story of our future, we talked to more than 100 employees in the company, from the senior people all the way through to frontline workers in the company, to build this. So everyone felt, when we rolled it out, everyone felt they had a little bit of an input into it. And in fact, we actually adjusted one of our values through the feedback that we had gotten from the workforce. We adjusted our values because there was a misalignment between what we were thinking and what the people of the organization were thinking. So we adjusted that. And we built the strategy through story. Now, it wasn't me going around the globe sharing this story as the CEO with 5,000 people. When I see CEOs do that, I just shake my head. Because then it becomes Wray's strategy. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted it to be our strategy. So what we did is we got leaders to put themselves in the picture. I facilitated a 3 to 4 hour conversation with my executive team. And through that conversation, they had to put themselves in the picture so that they could go to their leaders and share the story with them. And so on and so on. And that 3 to 4 hour conversation was the training people got to go and deliver their story of the strategy. Yeah, people got a guideline, conversation guide, so at least we had a consistent message. But each leader had to put themselves in the picture and had to share the story of the strategy and how that vision and that story impacted the people of their departments, the people of their division. And what this exercise did is it drove ownership and engagement like you've never seen at all levels of the organization. People were enthusiastic. You can probably see in some of these images. People were enthusiastic about what we were doing. And the essential truth about engagement, because I believe engagement is one of the key things as leaders we need to be really, really focused on. And the essential truth of this is that management does not get you engagement. Management gets you compliance. Leadership will get you engagement. And leaders should have one purpose in mind: to achieve increasingly positive results through the efforts of their people. Those are the resources we have. It's our people. We're no longer the equipment operator. We're no longer the engineer doing the designs. The tools we have are our people. And then we've got to remember that no leader can convince someone to become something that the leader is not. If you lead with purpose, you will ignite passion. If you lead with integrity, you will begin to create trust. If you lead with a real servant's heart, you'll create commitment. And if you're a leader with true stewardship over all the resources that are under your care and responsibility, you'll begin to create loyalty. And the most important piece of leadership that I talk about a lot is that. Let me tell you the essential truth as a leader. You can't lead your people until you learn to love your people. Before you can lead your people, learn to love your people. And that takes courage. It takes courage. In many organizations, that is not the norm. So to make it the norm, it takes courage to step out of that and to step up with confidence and to love your people. We need to have the courage to care. While management provides the ladder to achieve a goal, leadership ensures that the ladder, in fact, is standing against the correct wall. Management's important, okay? But so is leadership. Once a leader provides an organization with a vision and clear goals, and the people have the power, that's important. Are your people empowered to achieve their goals? And once you get that in place, an exciting thing begins to happen. You get a committed team dedicated to personal and organizational excellence. Provide the vision, build the enthusiasm, and create power in your people. Empower them. And when we initially rolled this out in the company, I didn't actually measure the engagement. I had no metric as to what the engagement was like. But just looking at that, you can see it wasn't very good. And the problem was coming from the top. So shortly after rolling this out, I decided to measure the engagement, and that's what we did. And these are the results we got. I was disappointed. But imagine how they were before we even rolled out the strategy. Take another 30% off that, I would guess. A year later, I measured the engagement again. We moved the dial. And I still thought then we could probably move the dial a little bit more. But we moved the dial from probably somewhere around 40% to upwards of 60% engagement. And I'm going to talk about some of the trends in engagement. And then when I started looking at it, I realized we were actually doing pretty well with 63%. But the important thing is, as the engagement moved, the performance moved. When people are highly engaged and enthusiastic and come to work, they show up every day with enthusiasm to make a difference, the performance dial moves. And you as the leader aren't actually moving it, your people are moving the dial. And this is what it's all about. Success in our organizations is based on leaders at all levels understanding the impact that their behaviors have on performance. The things we say and do. Leaders must actively eliminate risk and poor productivity, particularly for the frontline worker. Leaders at all levels of the organization need to be fully engaged themselves and equipped to drive the engagement with passion and with purpose. To actively go to the front line, and from these interactions, learn from them. Learn from the people, the frontline workers, what are the obstacles? As leaders, we need to be listening to our people, not telling them what to do, listening to them so that we can improve the way we lead and that we can remove some of these obstacles that are hindering our safety performance and our productivity performance. And we need to be setting expectations for the behaviors of people consistent with our culture and our values. And the leader behaviors and expectations must also be well defined. And we need to hold each other accountable as leaders. And at the end of the day, leadership must own and lead performance by their own behaviors. The things we say and do. There's only two things we can do to engage with our people and drive their performance. The things we say and the things we do. There's nothing else we can do. And we actually did do an exercise. This was an exercise I did with my executive, and we actually did identify the behaviors you wanted to hold each other accountable for. And this was the initial stage. I know Tim's probably looking at things, right? Those aren't very nicely pinpointed behaviors, and I agree with you, Tim. I agree with you. But we did create a little bit of a handbook where we as an executive actually did hold each other accountable. These are the behaviors that we expect from each other as executives, and we held each other accountable for that. Because our behaviors as leaders have a profound influence on the values and the culture and the engagement of our people. People underestimate the profound influence our behaviors as leaders have on the people that we lead. Every time you see these folks, it has a profound influence on their behavior. Because as leadership, we actually are responsible for the culture of the organization. That's why you're a leader. You're responsible for the behavior of your people, which is culture. You're also responsible for the goals, the strategy of the organization. That's what leadership does. And we mustn't forget the profound influence that our behaviors are going to have on the behaviors of our people, on the culture of the organization, and on the strategy of the organization through our personal behaviors. Jim Collins, in his book From Good to Great, talks about getting the right people on the bus. And yes, that is important, but he also talks about focusing on the people above all and always. And it was through this that I went and developed a strategy execution model, and it's not very complex. I always say leading people is not a rocket science. Man, it's a whole lot more complicated than that. Okay? But in this model, really, it's about setting that vision, getting alignment of the goals throughout the organization. Okay? Define the outcomes and cascade those goals, clearly defining expectations and the behaviors you expect of people. Have a way of measuring your goal, measuring your progress to accomplish these goals, and then you need to be measuring the performance of the business, but also the performance of the people. And I'm not talking about annual performance reviews. If that's what you're doing, you're wasting your time, okay? We should be reviewing performance every single day. Every conversation we have with our people should be about performance, okay? That's what we do as leaders. And as we begin to do that, we'll begin to create that high-performance culture, having those positive conversations about a person's performance. And at the heart of this is an actively engaged leadership team. Because if you have an actively engaged leadership team that is truly engaged and equipped, especially emotionally, you'll begin to create a self-motivated and actively caring workforce. Because our behaviors as leaders have that profound influence on the behaviors of our people. And then people in the organization need to understand what's in it for me. That's important. What's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? But as a leader, we want to then transform that to what's in me for it. We want to take what's in it for me and push it towards what's in me for it. How can I contribute? And when people are emotionally connected through your conversations as a leader you're having with them, and they're emotionally connected to you as the leader and to the business and to the culture of the business, then you start to create that, what can I give? What's in me for it? I want to show you some engagement trends. I don't know if any of you watch or follow the Gallup Global State of the Workplace. It's a free download if you want to download it. You can Google it and download the report. You can read it. The 2026 report just came out, so I haven't really studied it very much, but I'll talk a little bit about it. In 2024, global employee engagement fell, costing the world economy $438 billion. In 2025, global employee engagement declined, for a second year to its lowest level since 2020, and you can see that in the image on the right. Employee engagement in the US fell to its lowest level in a decade in 2024. That's lower than during the pandemic. And only 46% of employees clearly know what is expected of them, which was down 10 points since 2020. However, low engagement in managers is what accounts for that. What the Gallup Global State of the Workplace report shows is that it's the manager disengagement that's driving employee disengagement. But it's not going to stop at managers. If they're disengaged, management will be disengaged, employees will disengage, and your business performance is going to suffer. There we can see some of it. Is the management engagement coming down? I'd love to see next year's report when we see the 2026 employee engagement, how this impacts the employee engagement. But what I found interesting is that Gallup found in 2025 that best practice organizations, 79% of managers were engaged at work, nearly quadruple the global average. And it's worth keeping in mind that still only about 1 in 3 US employees and 1 in 5 Canadian employees are in fact engaged at work. I'm not saying that's in your organization, but that's the national averages. And the key driver of engagement in organizations is trust in management. From 2022 to 24, trust in immediate managers took a nosedive from 46 to 29%. So what exactly is engagement? Engagement is capturing the heads and the hearts of your employees. That's what engagement really is. Satisfaction is about doing my job. It's about making me successful, and it's about personal commitment. Engagement, however, is about doing my job above and beyond, making me and the company successful. There's a mutual commitment. And when we get the engagement right, that's when we move that what's in it for me to what's in me for it. Dimension Data International also does a biannual leadership review or leadership forecast. And this is from their 2023 report where they showed the top concerns of CEOs around the world. And they probably survey around 20,000 different leaders, CEOs, business leaders, and this is what they came up with, that attracting and retaining top talent, developing the next generation of leaders, and maintaining an engaged workforce were top of mind for global CEOs. It's all about the people. That's what CEOs are concerned about. In their following report, we saw attracting and retaining talent still at the top of mind for global CEOs, but developing the next generation of leaders had dropped off a little bit, and maintaining an engaged workforce had moved down to position, I think it's number 7. So CEOs weren't that focused on the engagement, and look what happened to it. It took a nosedive. Okay, and I guess in 2024, 25, there's been a lot of uncertainty in our world that we live in, so one can understand how some of these things have moved into the forefront of what CEOs are concerned about. But clearly, there is a focus required on retention and leadership development. So how best do we engage our employees? The best way to engage our employees and inspire employees is to recognize them. All too often, I know in our industry, in construction and mining, we are conditioned to go into the workplace, find the things that are not working well, and fix them. And when I talk to frontline supervisors and middle managers, that's what they tell me. That's their job. Well, it's actually not. I'm not saying ignore the things that need to be fixed, but let's spend more time inspiring people through recognizing them. And the research is overwhelmingly positive. Okay? Employees who strongly agree that recognition is an important part of the organization are almost 4 times as likely to strongly agree that they are connected to the culture of the organization. Employees who receive great recognition are 20 times as likely to be engaged. as employees who receive poor recognition. And among employees who have great recognition experiences, 72% say that they are recognized on the little things. You don't have to only recognize the big things. And I remember in one of my first engagements with Scott Geller, he talked about the success seekers and the failure avoiders. And this is it. This is what we're talking about. Making people feel that what they're doing is important. And the research supports it. If we go and create that positive environment for our people and recognize the little things they're doing well, you'll be surprised how the dial begins to move. And we need to engage through our vision. Okay, great leaders are totally focused on their vision. And I'm not talking about the CEOs, I'm talking about every leader in the organization. How often are you talking to your people about your vision for your team? We should be doing that. Great leaders are focused on that. One of the key characteristics of a high-performance team is they have that vivid picture of the future. What is your safety vision for your team? Have you discussed that with them? When I talk to some leaders and I ask them, tell me about your safety vision for your crew, man, I hear some funny things. Oh, my vision is 0. Okay, 0 what? Okay, we need to be talking about that vision. Tell the story of the future because stories are memorable. And then teams are guided by the story of the future. And then share that story. Get people to be in the story. Make it personal. Involve people in creating the story. Then you'll begin to foster commitment, trust, and engagement. Create that sense of belonging and build the engagement. So here's the path to a global productivity boom. Ensure all managers receive development to cut extreme manager disengagement in half. Less than half the world's managers say they have received leadership development. Half as many managers who receive development are actively disengaged. So we can cut that in half just by developing our leaders. Develop effective coaching techniques to boost manager performance. Some people are just natural. They've got the talents. They're phenomenal coaches. Others are not. But the good news is we can actually develop good coaching skills within people. And then increase manager well-being by an ongoing development program for them. So let's start with developing our leaders who can then develop the workforce. And here's the essential truth about leadership development. If I ask you this, if I want to lose weight, how many diet books do I need to read? Or if I want to learn to swim, how many books on swimming do I need to read? Well, the truth is not that many, right? If I want to lose weight, what do I need to do? I need to change my behaviors. I need to eat differently. I need to exercise. Okay? Leadership development is the same. Leadership development, like swimming, can't be learned by reading about it. At some point, you've got to jump in the water. Leadership development is action-orientated. We need to do things differently. Okay? If we want to move from being a boss to being an inspirational leader, or moving from being that micromanager towards being an effective delegator, or moving from that command and control to a collaborative leader, or creating that culture of coaching as opposed to telling, we can do that. But we need to start with behavior change. And we need to focus on the behavior change of the people, of the leadership. That's how we develop our leaders. We need to create an environment where leaders want to change and do change because they're inspired to change. And let me say this, once-off workshops are not effective. There needs to be a process of reinforcement, a process of spaced repetition to build these new habits in our leaders. And the really important piece of leadership development is you need to be tracking and measuring actual business goals as you go through it. As you develop your leaders, be measuring their behaviors, yes, but also measure the actual business improvement that's happening. Because if we develop our leaders and there's no impact on bottom line performance, what is the point? So that we can be nice guys? If our leadership development is not keeping people safer and improving bottom line performance, well, there is no point. We've got to be measuring our progress we're making. Because as we measure those great results, that's one of the best reinforcements of behavior is these positive results. And I see too many leadership development programs that don't do this. And they need to do that. And it's a very simple concept. We have new ideas. I don't know what happened to my slide. Oh, it must be the IT folk behind there. Okay. But we have new ideas, and we need to take those new ideas and practice them with spaced repetition. Okay? And when we practice them with spaced repetition, we begin to recondition how we think as leaders. We begin to develop new attitudes. Okay? And then we begin to see the results that we're looking for, because the transfer of learning to on-the-job behavior is what needs to take place. Because if you keep on doing the same old things, guess what? You're going to get the same old results. You can't expect results to change if you're not doing things differently. The things we say and do need to change if we want to see different results. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So motivational leadership is the ability to inspire, encourage, and drive individuals or teams towards achieving both organizational and personal goals. It involves creating a positive work environment, setting clear objectives, and fostering a culture of growth, engagement, and resilience. I'll end with this closing thought. Leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about taking care of those in your charge. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Wray.